Boone Thatcher knew three things the moment he saw the smoke rising from Fort Clark. Someone was living there, the county was right, and he was going to regret taking this job. The fort had been dead for 12 years. Federal property abandoned in '73 when the Army pulled out. Now the county clerk wanted it cleared. Order of eviction in hand. 24 hours, no questions. Squatter situation, the man had said. Apache woman. Probably harmless, but the land's going up for auction, and we can't have complications. Boone had taken the envelope because he needed the $50. Riding out to an empty fort and handing a piece of paper to some drifter seemed easier than fixing the fence on his own 200 acres that he'd been staring at for 3 years. He was wrong. The woman stood in the doorway of the old officer's quarters when he rode in at dawn. 4 children behind her. Mestizo, all of them, a girl about 12, 2 boys younger, small one, maybe 5. The woman herself was Apache. Dark braid over one shoulder, plain cotton dress mended too many times, boots that had seen more miles than most horses. It was her face that stopped him. She looked at him like she'd been expecting him. Not expecting someone, expecting him specifically. Boone's horse shifted under him and he steadied it, kept his hand away from the belt where his old colt used to hang. He hadn't worn the gun in 2 years, hadn't worn the badge in 12. The woman didn't move, just stood there with one hand on the frame and the other resting on the shoulder of the oldest girl. The morning light, cut sideways across the fort yard, turned the dust gold. Boone could hear the creek running past the east wall. Las Moras. Still there, still moving, same as it had been the last time he'd stood in this place. His chest tightened, and he knew her. It took 3 heartbeats, the way she held her shoulders, the scar at the corner of her mouth, the stillness that wasn't fear, but something harder. Saya. Her name hit him like a fist. He hadn't said it out loud in 12 years, hadn't let himself think it in 10. And here she was, standing in the doorway of the fort where he'd married her, where he'd made promises in front of a priest and God and her people, where he'd left her 3 months later before the sun came up, taking his horse and his cowardice and the lie he told himself about what a ranger could and couldn't do. She didn't say his name, didn't smile, didn't cry, just stood there, one hand still on the girl's shoulder, the other loose at her side. "Boone," she said finally, flat as stating a fact. He swallowed against a dry mouth. "Ma'am." The girl beside her, the 12-year-old, turned her head and studied him with eyes too calm, too knowing for a child. Boone looked away, looked at the envelope in his hand with its county seal and the word eviction in block letters. There's a thing people run from their whole lives, until the day the road ends and all that's left is the door they never had the guts to open. If you've ever left something behind you shouldn't have, you know exactly what Boone felt when he saw her face. He cleared his throat and tried to find the voice he used to use when he wore the badge. "I've got an order here from the county. Says this property's federal land, abandoned, and you're trespassing." Saya finished for him without anger, just tired certainty. "I know what it says." "Then you know I have to." "You don't have to do anything, Boone." Her voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that's louder than shouting. "You never did." The words landed clean and he felt them in his ribs. Behind her, one of the younger boys whispered something, and Saya said something back in Apache. low, soothing, and the boy went quiet. She didn't take her eyes off Boone. "How long you been here?" he asked. 3 years. "Alone?" "No." She nodded toward the children. "We're 5. Boone looked at them again. The oldest girl was still watching him, a scar on her left temple, thin, white, old. The kind you get falling off something as a kid. The kind his sister had. The kind he saw in the mirror every morning when he shaved the left side of his jaw. His stomach turned over. "They yours?" he asked. Tsaya tilted her head, almost smiled. "Does it matter?" It did, though he didn't know why yet. "County wants this place cleared," he said. "Auction's in 2 weeks. If you're still here when the buyers come through, then what?" Tsaya's voice didn't rise. "They shoot us? Burn the place? Drag 4 children into the street and call it law?" Boone opened his mouth and closed it. She stepped forward just 1 step into the light. "You came here to do a job, so do it. Serve your paper, ride back to your quiet ranch and your quiet life, and tell yourself you did what you had to." He should have. God knows he'd done it before. But his hand, the one holding the envelope, didn't move. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said. "No," Tsaya said softly. "You never were." She turned, and the children moved with her, smooth and practiced. The oldest girl glanced back once, just once, and Boone saw her eyes again. His eyes, the same gray-green his mother had, the same his sister had, the same he'd hated looking at in the mirror. Tsaya stopped at the threshold and didn't turn around. "You hungry?" she asked. Boone stared at her back. "What?" I said, "Are you hungry?" She looked over her shoulder. "You rode 8 miles, and the sun's barely up. I've got coffee on the stove and bread from yesterday. You can serve that paper on an empty stomach if you want. Or you can sit down, eat, and then we'll talk about what happens next." It wasn't a kindness, it was a test. Boone knew that. Knew she was daring him to sit at the same table he'd walked away from. Knew every second he stayed made leaving harder. He should have said no. Should have handed her the envelope and turned his horse and been gone before the coffee got cold. But he didn't. He dismounted slow, tied the reins to the post by the door, and walked toward the threshold. Tsaya looked at him like she'd been waiting 12 years for that door to open. "Come in," she said, "but leave the order outside." He left the envelope on the bench and stepped into the room where he'd once slept beside her. Same stone walls, same window facing east toward the creek, but everything else had changed. Blankets hung as partitions, a wood stove vented through the old chimney, a table made from planks laid across sawhorses, tin cups, dried beans, cornmeal on a shelf, all clean, ordered in the way things are when you have nothing, and keep it anyway. The 4 children sat along one side of the table, the oldest girl on the end. Tsaya poured coffee into a chipped mug and set it in front of him, and Boone sat. The coffee was strong and bitter, exactly the way he used to drink it. Nobody spoke. "They're not mine," Tsaya said quietly, "except one." Boone looked up. She was leaning against the wall by the stove, arms folded, watching him the way you watch a horse you're not sure will bolt. "The others were brought to me," she continued. "Orphans, Mestizo children no one wanted, too Indian for the towns, too white for the tribes. Travelers knew I'd take them in." Boone set the cup down carefully. "Safe from what?" Tsaya's mouth tightened. "From men who see mixed blood and call it a problem that needs solving." "Bounty hunters." "Close enough." She pulled down a wooden box from the shelf and took out a folded piece of paper, creased and handled. "This is why I'm still here," she said, setting it on the table. Boone unfolded it and saw church stationery, Father Galloway's signature from Brackettville, custodial guardianship, 4 children, steady income through scribal work. "You write letters," he said, "for families of soldiers who died out here, men who left people behind, needing to know how it happened and where they're buried." Her voice was flat. "The priest pays me for the work, calls it legal income." Boone looked at the children again, still quiet, but listening. "County doesn't care about a letter from a priest," he said. "No," Saya agreed, "but a federal judge might." She took the paper back, folded it, and returned it to the box. "3 days ago, a man came through Spofford Station asking questions. How many Indians still lived out this way, if anyone knew about the old fort, if there were children." Boone's gut tightened. "Bounty hunter?" "3 of them, coming from the east, 8 miles out, maybe less by now." Saya crossed her arms. "The county didn't send you here to evict squatters, Boone. They sent you to clean up before the hunters arrive and make it someone else's problem." He wanted to say she was wrong, but he'd been a ranger long enough to know when a story had holes. Why would the county care? Because if 3 white men drag 4 Mestizo children out of a federal fort and someone writes it up in a newspaper, the county looks bad and the land auction gets complicated. She shrugged. "But if the fort's already empty when they get here, no incident, no story, no questions asked." Boone stared at the scarred table. He thought about the envelope outside. The clerk. "Probably harmless, but we can't have complications." "You can't stay here," he said. "I won't leave." "They'll take the kids." "Not if I prove custody." She nodded toward the box. "That letter's legal. The priest will testify if it comes to it." "Won't matter if they don't care about the law." "Then you stop them." The words hung between them. Boone looked at her and saw no plea, no desperation, just tired certainty. She wasn't asking him to be a hero. She was telling him what he already knew. Walk away now, those children would be gone by tomorrow, and one of them had his eyes. He didn't want to ask, didn't want to know, but the question came out anyway, quiet and rough. "Which one is yours?" Saya didn't answer right away. She looked at the oldest girl, the one with the scar, the one who'd been watching since he rode in. The girl's head turned. Something passed between them. "Her name is Nala," Saya said. "She's 12. 12 years. The number hit like a stone." Saya turned back, and her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "She knows who you are. I never lied to her, but I never told her you'd come back." Boone's hands went cold. He looked at the girl again, really looked. The scar on her temple, the gray-green eyes, the way she held her shoulders, waiting for things that didn't come. Nala looked back and didn't blink. "They'll be here by tomorrow morning," Saya said. "You can ride out now, or you can stay and help keep them safe." It wasn't a request. It was a door. The same door he'd walked away from 12 years ago. Boone's throat was dry. His chest was tight. Every instinct told him to get up, get on his horse, and ride back to the quiet ranch where the only thing he had to face was broken fence and his own reflection. But the girl was still looking at him. Somewhere 8 miles east, 3 men were riding closer. He set his cup down slow. I'll need to see the rest of your papers. Something in Sea's posture softened, just barely. She reached into the box and pulled out a second document, older, yellowed. She didn't hand it to him. You want to help? Then be honest. You knew this place. You knew this creek. You knew me. Her voice dropped. Why did you really come here, Boone? He could have lied, could have said it was just a job, just $50. But he was tired of lies, because I thought it would be empty. Saya nodded slow. She set the paper on the table but kept her hand on it. Read it, then decide if you stay or run again. Boone looked down. Birth record, faded ink, church letterhead. He didn't touch it, didn't need to. The girl turned her face toward the light coming through the window, and Boone saw the scar on her temple catch the sun, the same scar he'd gotten falling off a fence rail when he was 7. Nala wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking out the window toward the east, where the road came in, waiting. The way her mother had waited for 12 years, not asking, not crying, just waiting. Boone lifted the paper with 2 fingers. Careful. Birth certificate from the Church of San Felipe, Brackettville, dated March 1874. Mother, Saya. Father, Boone Thatcher. Witness, Father Patrick Galloway. The ink was faded, but the names were clear, legal, registered, a fact with his signature on it. He set it down, and his hand stayed flat on the table, steadying something that wasn't the paper. I didn't know, he said. I know. Saya took the certificate back, folded it, and returned it to the box. You were already gone when I found out. Nahla stood up without a word and carried her plate to the basin. The younger children followed, moving quiet the way kids do when they've learned not to interrupt grown-up silence. Boone watched them go. She doesn't talk much, Saya said. Takes after somebody. Not me. There was almost a smile in her voice. She used to talk all the time, told stories, sang, asked questions I didn't have answers for. Then the missionaries came. Boone's jaw tightened. When? 8 years old. They said I couldn't provide proper schooling, proper faith. Said a half-blood child needed civilization. Saya's voice stayed level, but her hands gripped the edge of the table. Took her to a school in San Antonio and kept her 4 years. And you let them? She met his eyes and her jaw set, the same stubbornness that had survived 12 years alone. I didn't have a choice, Boone. I was Apache. I was alone. I had no husband on record willing to sign for her. She let that sit. So yes, I let them. The words cut clean. One of the younger boys, maybe 7, dark hair, quiet eyes, peered around the partition, waiting. Saya waved him over and he came, carrying a wooden horse whittled smooth. This is Teo, she said. His mother died of fever 2 winters ago near Del Rio. A trader brought him here because he knew I'd take him. The boy showed Boone the horse without speaking, then retreated to the corner where the other children were sitting on a woven mat, playing some quiet game with stones. The middle one's easy, Saya continued. Comanche father, Mexican mother, both killed in a raid 4 years back. A ranch hand found him hiding in a root cellar. And the youngest, Koa, 5 years old, left on the steps of the church in Brackettville with a note pinned to his shirt. Half-breed, no family, God forgive me. She said it without bitterness, just fact. Father Galloway brought him here himself. Boone looked at the 4 of them. Different faces, different stories, same outcome. Unwanted by two worlds, taken in by a woman the law said had no right to be here. They're good kids, Saya added. They know how to be quiet when they need to be. They know how to run. You've had to run before. Twice. Once from a county marshal, once from a man who thought Indian children were easier to sell than cattle. She crossed her arms. We came back both times. This is the only place I know they're safe. Boone stood and walked to the window. The sun was higher now, turning the stone walls gold. The creek ran steady past the east side, same current that had been there when he'd knelt beside it and made promises he didn't keep. They'll be here by morning, he said. I know. 3 armed men against 1 woman and 4 children, math doesn't work. Then help me make it work. He turned. Saya was still by the table, arms folded. The lamplight caught the worn edges of the leather pouch on the shelf, documents she'd kept for 12 years, waiting for someone to make them matter. I don't have a badge anymore, Boone said. No authority, no weight behind my word. I'm just a man with a horse and bad knees. That's more than we had yesterday. He wanted to argue, wanted to say she was asking too much, that 12 years was too long to show up and pretend he had a right to stand between her and danger. But she wasn't asking him to be a hero. She was asking him to be there, and he hadn't been, not once. What do you need? He asked. Saya exhaled slow. The doors and windows, most of them are rotted through. If they want to get in, they will. I need the east side reinforced. There's planks in the old supply shed we can use, and I need someone watching the road come dawn. You have nails. Enough. Hammer? She almost smiled. I've been here 3 years, Boone. I didn't survive on prayers. He rolled his sleeves and moved toward the door. Stopped. Why'd you stay? Could have gone south, found a settlement, disappeared. Saya looked at the children. Nakhla was sitting with the youngest boy, Koa, showing him how to stack stones without them falling. Patient, careful. Because running teaches them the world doesn't want them, Saya said quietly. Staying teaches them they have a right to be here. Boone didn't have an answer for that, so he went outside and found the shed. The planks were rough-cut pine, gray with age, but still solid. He carried them 2 at a time across the yard while Saya sorted nails from a rusted tin, and the children watched from the window but didn't come out. Boone worked without talking, measured the gaps in the door frame, fitted the boards, drove the nails in straight. His shoulder ached from old injury, and his hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but the work was familiar. Saya handed him nails without being asked. Same rhythm they used to have. You ever think about leaving? He asked, not looking up. The fort? Texas. She was quiet a long time. Then, every day for the first year. What stopped you? I didn't want to give you the satisfaction. He missed the next nail and hit his thumb. Swore under his breath. Saya didn't laugh, but he could feel her almost doing it. You still angry? He asked. Anger's expensive. I can't afford it. Boone hammered the last nail flush and stepped back to check his work. The door was solid now. Wouldn't stop a bullet, but it would slow a boot. He wiped his hands on his pants and looked at her. I don't know if I can stop them, he said. 3 men who want those kids bad enough to ride this far, they're not going to turn around because I ask nice. I know. And if it goes bad, if they get past me, then you'll have tried. Saya met his eyes. That's more than you did last time." The words cut, but all Boone felt was tired. He looked past her toward the window where Nahla was still sitting with the younger children. She glanced up once, quick, then back down. "She doesn't trust me," he said. "Would you?" Tsaya picked up the empty nail tin. "Her whole life I told her the truth, that her father was a ranger, that he left before she was born, that I didn't know if he'd ever come back. She didn't cry about it or ask why, just accepted it. She deserved better." "Yes." Tsaya's voice was flat. "She did." Boone turned back to the door and tested the boards with his weight. Solid. It would hold. "When the missionaries took her," Tsaya said behind him, "she didn't cry then either, just held my hand till they pulled her into the wagon, then let go without looking back. But you got her back. 2 years ago. Took me 4 years to prove I had income, legal residency, a home." She gestured at the fort. "This place. Father Galloway testified that I was fit, and the court finally agreed. She come back different, quieter, careful." Tsaya folded her arms. "She learned not to expect things." Boone felt that in his chest. "I didn't know she existed," he said. "I know, but she exists now." Tsaya's voice was steady. "And tomorrow morning, 3 men are going to try to take her and the others because the law says children like them are problems, not people. You think I can change that?" "No." She looked at him, clear and unflinching. "But I think you can stand in front of it long enough for me to prove they're mine." The sun was almost overhead now, and Boone could feel the heat rising off the stone walls. Somewhere east, 3 horses were coming closer. He should leave now, take the eviction order and go. Tell the county he'd delivered the message and washed his hands of the rest. But Nahla was still in the window, watching the road. "I'll stay till morning," he said. Tsaya nodded once. No thank you, no relief, just acknowledgement. "There's beans and cornbread for supper," she said. "You can sleep in the old barracks if you want, or leave now and get home before dark." It wasn't a question. It was a choice. Boone looked at the road leading out, then at the door he'd just reinforced. At the window, where a 12-year-old girl sat with his eyes and his scar and none of his name. "I'll stay," he said. Tsaya turned and walked back inside without another word. Boone stood in the yard and listened to the creek running, remembering how he'd left this place in silence and darkness without saying goodbye. Now he was back and the door was still open. He followed her inside. The afternoon passed in small tasks. Boone checked the other windows, found 2 shutters hanging loose, and fixed them with leather straps from the tack room. The children stayed out of his way, but he could feel them watching. Tsaya cooked at the stove, beans, cornbread, coffee, and the smell filled the room. At supper, the children ate without talking. Nahla sat across from him and didn't look up once. Her hands were small on the spoon, careful and deliberate. Boone wanted to say something, anything, but every sentence he started in his head ended in a lie or an excuse, so he stayed quiet. After the meal, Tsaya sent the younger 3 to the sleeping mats behind the partition, but Nahla stayed at the table, cleaning plates in the basin. "You don't have to do that," Tsaya said. "I want to." Her voice was soft, careful, like she'd learned to make herself small so she wouldn't be a problem. Boone stood and carried his own plate over, setting it in the basin beside hers. "Thank you for supper," he said. Nahla glanced at him, just a flicker, then back to the plates. You're welcome. 2 words, quiet as breath. Boone stepped back and let her finish. Saya was sitting by the stove mending a shirt in the lamplight. I should check the horses, he said. They're fine. I should anyway. He went outside into the deep blue sky where stars were starting to show. Boone stood by the creek and tried to think of a single good reason he deserved to be here. Couldn't find one. Behind him, the door opened and he heard footsteps, light, hesitant. Nala. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to be heard, but far enough to run if she needed to. My mother said you used to be a ranger, she said. Boone turned. She was smaller up close, thinner than she should be, the scar on her temple pale in the starlight. I was, he said. Why'd you stop? Got old. She looked at him like she didn't believe that, but wasn't going to argue. She said you knew this place, that you were here before. Long time ago. She said you left. Boone's throat tightened. I did. Nala nodded slow, like that confirmed something she already knew. The men coming tomorrow, she said. Will you stop them? I'm going to try. And if you can't? He wanted to lie, wanted to say it would be fine, that everything would work out. But she was looking at him the way Saya had, waiting for the truth, not comfort. Then your mother and I will figure something else out, he said. She always does. Nahla's voice was quiet. She's good at that. I know. The girl turned toward the creek. I don't remember you, she said. You weren't born yet when I left. I know, but she told me about you, said you were brave, said you helped people. Boone's chest ached. Your mother's kinder than I deserve. She said that too. Despite everything, he almost smiled. Nala looked back at him and asked, Are you staying? Tonight, yes. And after? The question hung there, same one Saya had asked without words. Boone didn't have an answer, so he told the only truth he had. I don't know. Nala studied him a moment longer. Then she nodded and walked back toward the fort. At the door, she stopped. She waited a long time, the girl said. I don't think she'll wait again. She went inside and closed the door behind her. Boone stood alone in the dark, the creek running steady behind him. Same water that had been there when he'd made promises he didn't keep. When he came back inside, Saya was banking the fire, and the children were asleep behind the partition. He could hear their breathing, slow and even. She looked up, but didn't speak. Boone sat at the table where a cup of coffee was waiting, still hot. You didn't have to, he said. I know. He drank it slow, and she finished with the fire and sat across from him. You talked to her, Saya said. She talked to me. That's more than she's done with most people. She's careful. She learned it the hard way. Saya's hands folded on the table. You asked earlier why I stayed. That's the reason. So she'd have one place in the world she didn't have to be careful. Boone looked at the coffee. I should have come back. Yes. No argument, no softness, just fact. I told myself I couldn't, he said, that the law wouldn't let me have both, the badge and you. Told myself it was the only choice a man could make. And now I know I was lying. Saya watched him and asked, to me or to yourself? Both. She was quiet a long time before reaching into the wooden box on the shelf and pulling out another folded paper, setting it on the table between his coffee cup and her hands. You want to know what you left behind? She said softly. Read that, then you'll know. Boone looked down at the paper, but didn't touch it. Saya stood and said, "I'm going to sleep. You can take the barracks or you can leave now. Door's not locked." She moved toward the partition, then stopped. "You never asked if you left something behind when you went," she said. "You just assumed you didn't. Or maybe you hoped you didn't. Either way, you were wrong." She disappeared behind the blanket and the lamplight dimmed. Boone sat alone at the table with the folded paper between his hands. The same worn creases, the same weight as the birth certificate, but older, softer, handled more. He reached for it, then stopped. Outside, far in the distance, he thought he heard horses, or maybe it was just the wind. He picked up the paper and unfolded it slow. Marriage certificate, Church of San Felipe, Brackettville, 1873. Boone Thatcher, Texas Ranger, Saya of the Mescalero Apache, joined in matrimony before God and witness, this 7th day of June. Father Galloway's signature. 2 others he didn't recognize, Apache names, careful letters. His own signature at the bottom, younger handwriting, confident in a way he hadn't been in years. The paper had been folded and unfolded so many times. The creases were soft as cloth, the ink fading at the edges where fingers had traced the words. Boone set it down slow, and his hand stayed flat on the table. He'd signed it. He remembered signing it. The priest watching, Saya beside him in a cotton dress someone had lent her, the creek running behind them, and the sky so blue it hurt. He'd believed it then, believed he could make it work, that love and law could live in the same house. 3 months later, he'd ridden out before dawn and told himself the paper didn't matter because no one would honor it anyway. But she had. She'd kept it, folded it, carried it, 12 years. Boone stood, and the chair scraped loud in the silence. He walked to the window and looked out at nothing, just dark and stars, and the shape of the land that didn't care about signatures or promises or the ways a man could lie to himself. Behind the partition, one of the children stirred and settled. Saya didn't make a sound, but he knew she was awake, listening. He could leave now, walk out, take his horse, be gone by midnight. Same as before, but the paper was still on the table, and the girl, Nala, was still asleep a few feet away with his eyes and his blood, and no reason to believe he'd stay past sunrise. He sat back down and pulled the marriage certificate toward him, reading it again in the lamplight. Joined in matrimony, legal, binding, witnessed. If she had this, and if she had the birth certificate, and if the priest would testify. Boone's mind turned the pieces over. The county wanted the fort cleared. The bounty hunters wanted the children. But if Saya could prove she was legally married to a man with standing, even a retired ranger, then her claim to custody held weight. Except he'd abandoned her. Except abandonment didn't dissolve a marriage unless someone filed for it. And she clearly hadn't, which meant, legally, on paper, in the eyes of a court, they were still married. The thought hit him cold and strange. He folded the certificate along the old creases and set it back on the table. Stood again, paced to the door and stopped, hand on the frame. He could hear the creak outside, steady, patient. Zaya's voice came quiet from behind the partition. "You're still here." Not a question, just acknowledgement. Boone didn't turn, for now. That's all I asked. He looked back toward the blanket dividing the room. Couldn't see her, but felt her there. "Why'd you keep it?" he asked. The certificate? All of it. The marriage, the record, my name on her birth papers. You could have burned them, told her I was dead, started over. I could have, Tsaya said, but I didn't lie to you when I married you, and I wasn't going to start lying after you left. Boone closed his eyes. She deserved a father who stayed. Yes, but I wasn't going to invent one. The blanket rustled and Tsaya stepped out, still dressed, arms folded. She knows who you are. She knows you left. She knows I don't know if you'll stay. That's the truth, Boone. It's the only thing I have to give her that's worth anything. He met her eyes across the dim room. You told her I was brave, he said. You were, once. Tsaya's voice was steady. The man who rode into a camp of mescalero with no weapon and asked to marry me in front of 20 warriors who didn't trust him. That man was brave. The one who left 3 months later because he was afraid of what other rangers would say, that man was a coward. He didn't argue. I came back, he said. You came back because someone paid you $50 to hand me an eviction notice. She took a step closer. Don't call that brave. Don't call it anything but what it is. Boone looked at the floor. Then what do you want from me? I want you to decide. Tsaya gestured toward the window. They'll be here by dawn. 3 men with guns and the law on their side, or at least the law as they see it. You can ride out now and be home by morning, or you can stay and help me prove those children are mine to keep. And after that, you go back to your ranch and your quiet life, and we don't see each other again. She paused. Or you don't? Either way, I need to know now. Boone raised his head. She was thinner than she'd been, harder in the ways that come from surviving things you shouldn't have to, but her hands were steady on the table and her voice hadn't wavered once. You don't want me here, he said. No, Tsaya said quietly. I don't, but I want my children safe, and you're the only person within 50 miles who might be able to help me do that. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even kindness, just cold arithmetic. Boone nodded slow. All right. All right what? I'll stay. He looked at the marriage certificate on the table. And I'll stand with you when they come. Tsaya watched him for a long moment, and he couldn't tell if she believed him or not. Go to sleep, she said finally. You'll need it. She turned and went back behind the partition without waiting for an answer. Boone stood in the middle of the room with the dying lamplight and the sound of breathing behind the blanket. 4 children and a woman who had every reason not to trust him. He picked up the marriage certificate and looked at his own. Signature again. Boone Thatcher, Texas Ranger. He wasn't a ranger anymore, hadn't been for 12 years, but the signature was still there, and the marriage was still legal, and the girl asleep 10 feet away was still his daughter, whether he'd earned the title or not. He folded the paper, set it back in the wooden box on the shelf, and walked outside into the cold night air. The stars were thick overhead, and the land was silent except for the creek and the wind. Somewhere east, maybe 5 miles now, maybe less, 3 men were riding closer. Boone leaned against the stone wall of the fort and felt the weight of it, the age. 12 years abandoned, 12 years empty, same as him. He thought about the girl's question, "Are you staying?" He thought about Tsaya's answer, "He left. I don't know if he'll stay." He thought about the marriage certificate with his name on it, carried for 12 years by a woman who had every reason to burn it and chose not to. Courage isn't never being afraid. The phrase came to him unbidden, something his mother used to say, back when he was young enough to think bravery was just not flinching. But that wasn't it. Courage was going back to the place you ran from, facing the thing you left behind, standing in front of people you'd failed and saying, "I'm here now and I'm not leaving," even if you didn't deserve to. Boone pushed off the wall and went back inside. Tsaya was lying on a mat near the children, eyes closed but awake. He could tell by her breathing. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. She didn't open her eyes, didn't answer, but her breathing slowed, and after a while, he thought maybe she believed him. Boone took the bedroll from the barracks and spread it near the door, close enough to hear if anyone came. He lay down and stared at the ceiling beams, same ones he'd stared at 12 years ago, thinking about the future and how much time he thought he had to figure things out. He'd been wrong about a lot of things, but he was here now. And come morning, when the three men rode in with their guns and their certainty and their paperwork, he'd be standing between them and the door, not because he was brave, because he owed a debt he could never pay, and trying was the only thing left worth doing. Boone closed his eyes and listened to the sound of 5 people breathing in the dark. 4 children who didn't know him, and 1 woman who knew him too well. For the first time in 12 years, he wasn't alone. Morning came slow and cold. Boone woke before the sun and stepped outside to check the road. Nothing yet, just the land turning gray in the early light. He walked the perimeter of the fort, checking the reinforcements he'd made the day before. Solid enough. Wouldn't stop a determined man, but it would slow him down. When he came back inside, Tsaya was already awake, building up the fire, and the children were stirring behind the partition. She looked at him. "Sleep?" "Some." "Coffee's almost ready." He nodded and sat at the table. Nala came out first, quiet as always, and stopped when she saw him. "Good morning," Boone said. She looked at him a long moment, then said, "Morning." 2 words, but she said them. The other 3 children followed, Teo with his wooden horse, Easy rubbing sleep from his eyes, little Koa holding tight to Tsaya's skirt. They sat at the table, and Tsaya served cornmeal mush and coffee, and nobody spoke. Boone ate without tasting and kept his eyes on the window. When the meal was done, Tsaya sent the younger children to the back room with instructions to stay quiet and stay low. Nala started to follow, but Tsaya stopped her. "You stay with me," she said. The girl nodded and sat back down. Tsaya looked at Boone. "They'll come from the east." "I know." "You'll meet them outside?" "That's the plan. And if they don't listen, then we go to the next plan." "Which is?" Boone stood and checked the revolver he'd brought in from his saddlebag. Old Colt, clean and loaded, hadn't fired it in 2 years, but it would do the job if it came to that. "I don't let them pass the door," he said. Tsaya's mouth tightened, but she didn't argue. Nahala was watching him with those gray-green eyes, the same ones he saw in the mirror, and Boone wanted to say something that would make her less afraid. But fear was smart. Fear kept you alive. So he just said, "Stay close to your mother." Nala nodded. Boone walked to the door and stopped, one hand on the frame, looking back at the 2 of them, woman and girl, standing together in the lamplight. Saya met his eyes and said nothing. She didn't have to. Boone stepped outside and closed the door behind him. The sun was just clearing the horizon when he saw the dust rising in the east. 3 riders, moving steady, not rushed. Boone stood in the middle of the yard and waited. The riders came closer. He could make out details now. Broad hats, dusters, rifles across their saddles. Not law, not military, just men with a job and no questions about whether it was right. They stopped 20 feet from the fort, and the lead rider, older, gray beard, hard eyes, looked Boone up and down. "You the squatter?" the man asked. "No," Boone said. "I'm the husband." The 3 men exchanged glances. "Didn't know there was a husband," the gray-bearded one said. "There is." Boone kept his voice level. "Name's Boone Thatcher. The woman inside is my wife, legally married, church record on file in Brackettville. The children with her are under her legal guardianship, documented and witnessed by Father Galloway. You've got no claim here." The man smiled, slow and cold. "That's so." "It is." "Well, Mr. Thatcher, we've got a different piece of paper says those children are wards of the state, and we're authorized to retrieve them for proper placement." "By who?" "By the people paying us." The man leaned forward in his saddle. "Now you can step aside or you can get hurt. Don't much matter to me which." Boone didn't move. "Those children aren't going anywhere," he said. The second rider, younger, meaner looking, spat into the dirt. "You got a badge, old man?" "No." "Then you got no authority." "Don't need a badge to stand in front of my own door." The gray-bearded man's smile faded. "Last chance." Boone's hand stayed loose at his side, close to the Colt, but not touching it. "You ride onto this property, you're trespassing," he said. "You try to take those children, it's kidnapping, and I'll testify to both in any court that'll listen." Lot of talk from a man with no badge and no backup. "Don't need backup to tell the truth." The 3 men sat their horses, and Boone could see them weighing it, how much trouble this was worth, how much they were getting paid, whether an old man with a gun was bluffing or serious. The lead rider's eyes flicked toward the fort, then back to Boone. "We'll be back," he said. "You do that." Boone kept his voice flat. "Bring a lawyer next time." The man's jaw tightened, but he pulled his horse around, and the other 2 followed. They rode east without looking back. Boone stood in the yard and watched until the dust settled and the road was empty again. Then he turned and saw Saya, standing in the doorway with Nala beside her. She didn't say anything, just looked at him. Boone walked back across the yard and stopped at the threshold. "They'll come back," he said. "I know. With more men, or a writ, or something that gives them cover." "I know." Tseya's voice was calm. "But today they didn't take my children. That's enough." Nala was still looking at him, not with trust, not yet, but with something that wasn't fear. Boone nodded and stepped inside. Tseya closed the door behind him, and for the first time in 12 years, he was on the right side of it. The afternoon passed in waiting. Boone checked the perimeter again. The children stayed inside. Tseya moved through the room with quiet purpose, never stopping, never resting. When the sun started to drop, she called the children out from the back room and served supper: beans, cornbread, coffee. The meal was quiet, but not tense. After they ate, Nala asked Boone to show her how to saddle a horse properly, and he did. Walked her through checking the girth, settling the blanket, tightening the straps. She learned fast. "You're good at this," he said. "My mother taught me to pay attention." Boone smiled. "She's good at that." When the saddle was secure, Nahla stepped back and looked at him. "Why are you teaching me this?" she asked. "Because you should know, and because I want to." She studied him. "You planning to leave again?" The question was direct, without hesitation. Boone met her eyes. "No." "You sure?" "No," he said. "But I'm here now, and I'm not planning to go." Nahla nodded and turned back to the horse. "That'll have to be enough," she said. 2 days later, the same 3 riders came back, this time with 2 more men and a writ from the county judge. Boone stood outside the fort again. The gray-bearded man held up the paper. "Got a writ here from the county judge. Says these children are wards requiring proper Christian placement. Says we're authorized to retrieve them by any means necessary." "Let me see it." The man tossed the paper, and it landed in the dust at Boone's feet. He picked it up and unfolded it, read fast. County seal, judge's signature, legal language that said exactly what the man claimed. Boone folded it slow and handed it back. "That writ doesn't apply," he said. "How you figure?" "Because those children have a legal guardian. Their mother, my lawful wife, married in the Church of San Felipe in 1873, documented and witnessed." The gray-bearded man's jaw tightened, the easy grin gone for good. "You got proof of that?" "I do." "Let's see it." Boone didn't move. "It's inside, with my wife, who you're not getting near." The lean man with the mean eyes leaned over his saddle horn, unhurried, like a man pricing cattle. "Old man's bluffing." "Maybe," the leader said, "or maybe not." He leaned forward in his saddle. "But here's the thing, Mr. Thatcher. Even if you got papers, even if you got a marriage certificate from God himself, you're still one man with no badge standing between us and a county writ." Boone's hand stayed loose. "I told you once what the law calls this. Now there's paper behind it, a marriage certificate, birth records, and a federal judge will hear every word." Big words from a man outnumbered 5-1. Don't need numbers to tell the truth. The leader's jaw tightened. "Last chance. Step aside or get hurt." Boone didn't move. Behind him, the door opened and Saya stepped out, holding the leather pouch. "Don't," Boone said without turning. She ignored him and walked forward, stopping beside him. Opened the pouch and pulled out the marriage certificate, the birth records, the custody letters, held them up so the riders could see. "My name is Saya Thatcher," she said. "Married to this man in 1873 before a priest and witnesses. The girl inside is his daughter. The other 3 are under my legal guardianship documented by Father Galloway." The gray-bearded man squinted at the papers. "County says you're a squatter." "The county's wrong. This fort was abandoned federal property. I've lived here 3 years, maintained it, claimed it under homestead law. The marriage gives me standing. You have no right to be here." The 5 men sat their horses, weighing it. The writ said one thing, the papers said another. A federal court would side with the papers every time, if it got that far. The gray-bearded man's eyes flicked toward the fort, then back to Boone. "This ain't over," he said. "It is if you're smart. Ride back and tell whoever sent you these children are legally accounted for. Or push this and explain to a judge why you tried to kidnap a ranger's daughter." "You ain't a ranger." "Was for 15 years. I still know every judge between here and San Antonio. You want to test that? The leader's jaw worked. He looked at the other men. Then he pulled his horse around. "Let's go," he said. The others followed, slow and reluctant. They rode east and didn't look back. Boone watched until the dust settled. The road went empty. He turned. Tsaya still held the papers, her hands shaking now that the riders were gone. "You shouldn't have come out." They needed to see the papers. She folded them carefully, returned them to the pouch. Words aren't enough. Boone looked at her, thin and tired and still standing. "You built all this yourself," he said quietly. "I had to." She met his eyes. "Because you weren't here." He didn't argue. Nala opened the door and the three younger boys spilled out. Tsaya gathered them close, checked each one. "They'll be back," Tsaya said. "Not if we move first." Boone looked at her. "We ride to Bracketville at dawn. File a homestead claim. 3 years of occupation. You've got a legal right to this place. Get Father Galloway to testify. Make it official before they try again." Tsaya studied him. "You really staying?" "I am. Even when it gets hard. Especially then." She didn't answer right away. Her hand stayed folded on the table, and the silence stretched long enough for him to hear the creak outside. Finally, she nodded. "All right, we ride at dawn." They rode to Bracketville at first light, Boone on his horse, Tsaya and the children in a wagon borrowed from the fort's old stable. The road was empty, no riders, no dust in the distance. Nala sat beside her mother on the bench, watching the horizon the way she watched everything, careful, waiting for the thing that might go wrong. Father Galloway was waiting at the church. The priest who'd married them, baptized Nala, kept their records. He pulled out the ledger, found the entry from June 1873, and copied everything onto fresh paper. Marriage certificate, birth record, custody testimony. "This should hold in any court," he said, handing the documents to Tsaya. She folded them once, careful, and slipped them into the leather pouch. Boone watched her hands. Steady, practiced. 12 years of holding on to things that mattered. The priest looked at Boone. "Don't waste what you've been given a second chance to keep." Boone nodded. "I won't." They walked to the county clerk's office, a narrow building with dusty windows and a clerk who looked up from his desk like they'd interrupted something important. "Help you?" the man asked. Boone set the marriage certificate on the desk. "Filing a homestead claim. Fort Clark. 3 years continuous occupation by my wife. Federal land. Abandoned. We're claiming legal possession under the Homestead Act." The clerk frowned and pulled the document closer, read it once, then read it again. "You're married to her?" "I am. Since 73. "That's right." The clerk looked at Tsaya, then back at Boone. "County's planning an auction on that land." "County doesn't own it," Boone said. "It's federal property. We've met the residency requirement. File the claim." The man's mouth tightened, but he pulled out a form and started writing, copying the names, the dates, the details. When he finished, he stamped it with the county seal and slid it across the desk. "You'll get a hearing in 6 weeks. Judge'll decide if the claim holds." "It will," Tsaya said. The clerk didn't answer, just filed the paper and waved them out. Outside, the sun was high overhead. Nahla looked up at Boone. "That's it?" "That's it," he said. Now we wait. And if the judge says no, then we appeal, and we keep appealing until someone listens. Tsaya touched Nahla's shoulder. It'll hold. We've done everything right. They rode back to the fort in silence, and when they arrived, the place looked different, not abandoned, not temporary, just a stone building by a creek where 5 people lived. 6 weeks later, Judge Farrow ruled in their favor. The homestead claim was valid, the marriage legal, the custody proper. Fort Clark was recognized as Tsaya's lawful property under federal law, and the county auction was voided. Outside the courthouse, Nahla exhaled slow. "It's ours," she said. Tsaya folded the certified ruling into the leather pouch and nodded. They rode back to the fort, and the children ran to the creek. That night after supper, Boone stood to leave. Nahla asked if he was coming back. "Every week," he said, "and if I don't, you'll know where to find me." She nodded, and something in her face eased. Boone stepped outside and untied his horse. He mounted and turned the horse toward the road. "Boone!" Tsaya called from the doorway. He stopped. She stood in the lamplight, one hand on the frame. "Thank you," she said. 2 words, quiet and true. Boone nodded. "I'll see you next week." He rode out slow, and when he looked back, the light was still on, and Nahla was standing beside her mother, watching him go. But this time, they knew he'd come back. The weeks turned to months. Boone kept his word, riding to the fort every week, fixing what broke, teaching Nahla to ride. By spring, he'd moved from the ranch into the old barracks, and that night, Tsaya poured coffee and pushed the cup to his side of the table. Not a test this time, but an invitation. One evening, Nahla asked him, "You going to leave again?" Boone met her eyes. "No, but if I ever do, you'll know where I'm going. I won't disappear." She nodded. That was enough. He never became the father he should have been 12 years ago, but he became the man who stayed. And if you've ever had to choose between the easy road and the right one, you know how hard that choice is. If this story made you think about your own, drop a comment below. And if you want more like this, stick around. There's a new one every week.